translate that into 3 dimensions. So for that next part of our talk, let me hand off this wonderful clicker to Seth Thompson.
Morning, everyone. Can we hear me? All right, cool. Last time I was in front of a crowd this big was about 15 years ago in college in a wrestling match with a piece of spandex on me, so I'm a little bit nervous to be in front of you guys again today, but thanks for coming out, and looking forward to show you guys some cool stuff here. So especially being at 10:30 in the morning, I'm sure some of you guys have the Blizzcon Saturday morning hangover, so I'll try not to scream too loud in your ears here. All right. So, as Mark was showing you, based off all the amazing concepts, the stage width modeling that we had to start doing was to actually take those concepts and do a literal translation of them. So I'm going to go over that a little bit, and then I'm also going to talk to you about a lot of the different lands that Deathwing was going to destroy. So that's my specialty with the environment modeling, but I am going to be representing our entire modeling team today to get into both things. So the first thing to think about with Deathwing is this is the biggest character we've ever done before in terms of small details, large details. We knew he was going to be flying over everyone, all the different cities. He was going to have to look really good from a distance. He was also going to have to look good up close. So we had a lot of different modelers working on this, and so many different people touched this asset, and there was 2 guys in particular that really spearheaded this. 2 of our talented character modelers, Chung and Alvaro. Chung, he was a really good selection for this because he actually single-handedly pretty much handled all of Sindragosa for the Wrath of the Lich King cinematic. So he's a dragon expert. He's really good for this. And just talking about how monumental the scale was of Deathwing, he was huge. By huge, we mean really huge. So this representation here will show you how Deathwing just dwarfs Chung and Alvaro, and he is bigger than the size of a football field. So this was, you know, a really big thing to work on. So in order for us to get to this phase where you see this final really nice textures and model detail, we start with a concepting phase of our own in a 3D modeling process. And this is where we'll have artists work out base shapes, we get art direction, we apply more feedback from these base shapes, get some more art direction, and then we can kind of get a final sculpt like you see here. So one thing to think about with this, the cool part of this studying process that you see here is it's this 3D sculpting programs we use. Some of you might actually do them yourselves, like ZBrush, Mudbox, but it's this really free-form, fun way for us to create as artists with a very limited technical restrictions. So just imagine if you had a box of clay yourself and you can start making forms and have a lot of fun with it, and then we worry about the technical stuff after. So this is the best way for us to get these base forms signed off. The next thing we have to do is start adding all the extra little details. And as Mark was telling you, you know, Deep Home was a big challenge for us. So this shows you an example of where we do things to the camera. We want to really focus on what the viewer is going to see. So you can see in here, if you were to see actually firsthand, we have this low poly geometry. Then we have an art director come in and they'll paint over this again. And then you can kind of get the final look that you have here if everything goes according to plan. One other thing in particular to think about is an asset like Deathwing is so big that we wish we had time to make every single little part of him look amazing. But due to production needs and also making sure that we give the biggest bang for the buck for the viewer, we have to focus on these isolated areas. So that's why you're not going to see a close-up of Deathwing's ankle, because we just don't need to spend a lot of time on it. And then, you know, in the end, you'll get this really nice look like you saw here. So before I get into the environments, what I want to just talk about is how creating Deathwing was a unique situation where we had a lot of creative freedom, meaning I don't think we'd really fleshed out and complete 100% before the capacity what Deathwing was going to look like in its entirety. So we got to work a lot with the dev team, as you saw, with the jaw getting bigger and bigger. And it was this really fun organic creation process. Now when we're moving into the World of Warcraft, the lands, we know all of you players out here recognize the different structures that are in the game. So it was very critical that we made sure that everything that we create in our cinematic world represents the stuff that you guys see as players every day when you're in the game itself. So a good example of this to start with is Darkshore. And what I want to focus on here is where we take things with heightened realism, and we'll go from an in-game asset heightened realism example would be like small planks on the pier here. In this next shot, if you look down low, there's algae barnacles on the bottom of pier structures. We even add shingles to the tops of roofs. You may ask, why do we go shingles instead of these straight boards? This is an interesting part of the creative process where we get to work with our extremely talented in-game team and talk to them about, hey, we got this idea, we want to add some more detail, we think it's going to help sell the scale. And even in something like this where maybe it strays a little bit from the in-game design, they're like, yeah, go for it, let's make it happen, and we get those little extra elements in there that really sell this and make it feel believable in this cinematic world that we take our movies to. So a good example of where this creative process is a little bit different is, and I wanted to focus on the Sky Tower that we did for Ogremar, is our concept team and our team itself. Anytime we get to work on these in-game assets, we love to just go crazy, add tons of detail, and sometimes we start to get a little bit away from what the gamers recognize. And what we did in this case is we started going really rounded with the Sky Tower, and although it was looking pretty cool to us and we actually got somewhat far in the production process, something just didn't feel right to us. So we took a step back in this case after working with in-game, and we actually went to the game, took some screenshots from what our camera was going to see, and we noticed, hey, this feels a lot better, it's angular, and even though some of us that are these crazy high poly guys are thinking, oh, this is supposed to be low poly, and maybe it's supposed to be polygonal. The orcs actually, their architecture and culture is supposed to be harsh angular stuff. So we were able to kind of dial this back, come into this realm, and once we did it, it just sang with us, and it felt much more recognizable to the game. So the next thing I want to focus on is where we not only add heightened realism to our structures from the end game to the final, but also how we work on monumental structure. So this example is using is Lakhmadan, and in here you'll see from the end game to the basic model we start to add small structures, supports, cracks. Once we get into texturing, you can see tons of layers of little bricks, mortar. We have really nice water stains. When this comes through again, you probably won't be able to see it because our effects team covered up all the work. But there's some really cool plants that actually hang up from the... Sorry. Yeah, it's all good.
Sorry.
No, that actually hang down from the structures of the faces, these kind of things. And also, I just want to thank our in-game team and some of our editing team for getting us these nice kind of camera comparisons of the in-game to the cinematic render. It's pretty fun to check it out. So the final thing that I want to focus on before I hand it off to Mike is how we introduce monumental scale and heightened realism through the use of animation. Since we don't have animation represented here today, the one thing to look at here is where Deathwing lands upon Stormwind. So we saw real-world scale and size through the weight and heaviness of Deathwing. He's landing on these towers. He's crumbling with his force. Structures are breaking off. You can see, if you saw the really close animation, it's it's pretty cool. And also, too, the one thing that people always think about with animation is, it's always just a character. If you notice the camera shake, we actually have a previous team where our directors will come in and they're like, hey, we want this stuff, the cameras to react to our creatures or to our environments or to an explosion. All these little touches give you that really final cinematic look that kind of sells and gets you invested in the cinematic. So other than that, the one thing, of course, to focus on is how the effects help sell the real-world scale and the detail of everything. And I'll turn you guys over to Mike Kelleher now.
Thanks, Seth. Good morning. My name is Mike Kelleher. I am the supervisor for the effects team. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the effects you see inside the Cataclysm cinematic. The first time I think my supervisor and I looked at the storyboards that Mark had drawn, I think we actually laughed out loud. I may have cried a little bit. We have never, ever attempted anything like this before. It's just the sheer scale and size of some of these cinematics was just extremely daunting. There were going to be a lot of big challenges here. I think even at one point we actually asked seriously to the team, you're not joking, right? This is what we're going to do. And no, we very much wanted to do this. So I took the storyboards and I took it to the team and I showed it to them. They had a few mild concerns, and they provided some really, really positive feedback. Then we got to work. So today I want to talk about two different shots. The first one is 1,000 Needles, and the second one after that is Curtain of Fire over Darkshore. The 1,000 Needle shot actually was really initially a very, very different looking shot. The wave was going to actually tower above us, as you can see here in this side view, and then come crashing down on our camera position. And that was going to be challenging just to maintain the level of detail from the top of the wave all the way down to where the camera was. So we started to think a little bit about how to change that shot. Here's an example of the bathtub idea. The wave would come in from the back of the canyon, come careening across one of the walls, smash into the other side of the canyon, and eventually overcome our camera position. This sounded a lot more detailed. The wave would be in the back. We would just have to deal with the skirt. Here you can see this great color script concept from our concept team that we started working with. So we started development with that. Here's an example of our one of our initial particle passes, just that skirt that I talked about of wave water. And it's pretty good, but there was a concern that the particle count was beginning to get a little tiny bit crazy. Here's another example of the entire skirt as it approaches camera. And I think at the end of this this one right here, the particle count gets to be about 12.5 million particles, and we're only about halfway to camera position at this point. So that was a little bit frightening. That gets worse in the sense that these particles are actually not spray or mist or anything like that. It's more of just we're going to smooth those out, and those will become the surfaces of this water. As you can see here in this example, even at 12 million particles, it just wasn't the detail level that we needed it to be. Those mesas in the front are 250 feet tall. The big ones are 1,000 feet tall. Plus, we're having an enormously difficult time keeping textures on it. We had this spray here that needed to be emitted from parts of the wave, and when we actually tried to put foam textures on top of that, they would slide and slip, as you can see in this example. I thought it was cool, but the director rejected my, hey, what if we fill 1,000 Needles with saltwater taffy concept? Still think it's neat. So what did we do? We had this huge problem. Well, the answer was we actually changed the shot. Here's an animatic, just rough animatic of what we wanted to do. You can see here there have been a lot of changes. We're a lot closer to the wave. The camera is tilted up so we don't have to worry so much about that skirt. This is just a rough animatic to get an idea so we can start the conversation about what we wanted to do. Here's a flushed out model with some of the amazing modeling that Seth and his team did. Just a little bit further down the line, sort of talking about what we were going to do with this wave. And this really, really opened up the shot. It made it feel a lot more dynamic, more dangerous. The viewer was not going to get out of that canyon in time. So this was the approach that we went for. And I think this is just a great example of how things changed at Blizzard. The shot, modified over time, and I think we ended up with a better shot. So now that we were going to hit that wave's going to hit that mesa so close, we knew we were going to have to really focus on that interaction. This is some technology we started developing for that. Mere particles or dots wasn't going to hold up. We needed to feel that volume of spray. The spray might be 200, 300, maybe 500 feet tall. So this is just an example that's been put into a waterfall form when we started using it there. Every effect shot is made up of a lot of different layers, so I just wanted to break this one down for you. Here we go, that's the final shot. Here's the initial wave with some of the texturing and undercurrent. There's some foam surfaces on top, some reflection, and finally we get to our particle passes. Then we start working about maybe trying to integrate that wave into this wonderful world of 1,000 Needles. Here comes the spray. A little bit of color wash, foreground rocks, a little more spray, and then we cover the entire thing with a giant wave of water. No, it's awesome. It's a great shot. And since this is Cataclysm, why have one tidal wave when you can have two? So I wanted to also break down Booty Bay for you, just the same sort of thing. Here's the wave, some of the foam texturing. Interestingly, we could never actually get the foam to look right, so we finally ended up going to shoot some photos